finding all these things in one location, just below the surface, just ready to be uncovered. It's almost the stuff of dreams.
In 2018, a farmer's field in southeastern Norway turned into one of the most important archaeological sites in Viking history. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a massive ship buried just beneath the surface, an untouched time capsule from over 1,100 years ago. But as experts began digging, the real shock came not from what they found inside the ship, but what was beneath it.
Before the first boat, the smaller one, was discovered, I think the largest number of bodies buried at the same time in a boat was 4.
It was hiding a secret so shocking that it would rewrite what we know about Viking history. The buried ship. In late 2018, in a stretch of farmland in Østfold County, southeastern Norway, archaeologists scanning the ground near the ancient Gel Mound stumbled onto something remarkable. Using ground-penetrating radar, GPR, a non-invasive tool that reveals what lies beneath the soil, they detected the unmistakable outline of a massive ship.
A startling discovery in Norway, a buried Viking longship. The nearly 66-foot longship buried less than 2 feet below the topsoil.
It measured about 66 feet long, buried just below the surface. No excavation had taken place yet, but the image was clear. It was a Viking ship grave, forgotten by time.
But it's possible to have around 100 men on board a ship like that, so it's quite big.
This wasn't a shipwreck. This was a burial. And to understand why this mattered so much, it helps to step back and look at something older than even the Vikings, our human obsession with death and the afterlife.
Is death important for us human beings, for life, for us as a society? If you could live forever, would you live forever?
Across the globe, cultures have developed unique, sometimes awe-inspiring ways of honoring their dead. In Egypt, pharaohs were buried in pyramids, surrounded by gold and guarded by curses.
So that the dead king could participate in mysterious rituals to become one with the sky goddess.
In China, emperors rested beneath earth mounds with terracotta armies. In the British Isles, Neolithic people dug into hills to create passage tombs like Newgrange.
And some even speculate that the spirits would have used the light to leave the burial chamber.
And in the Arctic, even the Inuit built stone cairns for their departed. Yet among these many burial traditions, the use of boats stood out as something deeply symbolic and strangely consistent across distant civilizations.
I think the thing that caught everyone's attention, ship burials anyway, so I was excited about that.
In some cultures, boats weren't just transportation for the living, but vehicles to carry the soul across some great spiritual sea to the afterlife. To place a body in a boat was to prepare it for the ultimate journey, not across the ocean, but across realms.
It's truly astonishing. The nature of that burial is like nothing we've ever seen.
This idea shows up again and again. In ancient Egyptian texts, the sun god Ra sailed across the sky by day and through the underworld by night in a solar bark. In Norse mythology, the dead rode to Valhalla aboard burning ships pushed out to sea. And in real-world burials, these stories were echoed in grand gestures, like the one uncovered in Østfold.
This Viking ship burial, that was really something special.
The ship discovered in Østfold wasn't the first of its kind. One of the most famous ship burials in history was found at Sutton Hoo in England in 1939. Inside a massive burial mound was a ship, carefully laid out and packed with treasures. Items from as far away as Byzantium and the Mediterranean were recovered, such as swords, helmets, silverware, and gold coins. It was likely the final resting place of King Raedwald of East Anglia, a 7th century ruler. The richness of the burial stunned historians, not just for its luxury, but for what it implied. The lavishness of the grave could suggest that it's him. The dating is spot on. That early medieval Europe was more connected, wealthy, and spiritually complex than previously believed. That discovery raised a powerful question. Where did this practice of ship burial begin? Was it purely Norse? Did it come from older Indo-European traditions? Or was it an idea that passed between ancient peoples like a whispered story, reshaped with each retelling? What we do know is that by the time of the Viking Age, ship burials were both rare and reserved for the elite. These burials weren't common. They were statements made by royalty, chieftains, and warriors of high honor. Only a few earned a ship to carry them beyond death. So when the GPR scan revealed a 66-foot ship near the Gel Mound, a site already known for its Iron Age burial monuments, it wasn't just about finding wood in the dirt. It was about finding a missing piece of history, a symbol of status, power, and deep belief. What exactly lay inside that ship? That was the question on everyone's mind. But long before the first spade hit the soil, the discovery had already reignited a much older fascination. Where did this strange burial custom come from? The origins of the Viking ship burial tradition. Long before the Vikings set sail across Europe, the tradition of burying the dead in ships was already taking shape. The roots of this practice can be traced back to earlier Germanic tribes who saw death not as an end, but as a journey. And like any important journey, it required preparation, tools, and above all, a vessel. One of the most striking examples comes from the Merovingian dynasty, which ruled parts of what is now France and Germany from the 6th to 8th century. These kings and nobles buried their dead in elaborate ways, often including wagons, chariots, weapons, and on rare but powerful occasions, boats. Horses were sometimes added too, symbolizing the journey into the afterlife. These burials weren't quiet affairs, but public shows of power, legacy, and belief fit for elites who wanted to be remembered. But it was the Vikings who took this ritual and turned it into something legendary. By the time Viking culture began to rise in the late 700s, they had inherited and reimagined this burial style. For the Norse, ships were more than transport. They were sacred bridges between worlds.
The boats the Franks had were left behind from Charlemagne's age. They were like hulks. They were unmaneuverable.
A Viking's ship was part of their soul, and in death, it became the bridge between worlds. They believed that the dead would sail to the afterlife, a place called Valhalla or Folkvanger, where warriors would feast forever if they died with honor. In this way, the ship was a portal and a final ride across cosmic seas. But the Vikings added their own flavor to the tradition. Their burials were deeply tied to their mythology. Norse stories told of gods who traveled the skies and seas in ships. Even the sun and moon had boats pulled across the sky. So burying someone in a ship wasn't just about honoring them, but a way of placing them into the larger spiritual order of the universe. These funerals also followed strict social rules. Only the most respected chieftains, warriors, or high-status women received ship burials. Some were burned in fiery ceremonies, others were buried whole, with their ships placed inside burial mounds.
It was used as a burial ship for 2 women. The ship burial itself was tremendous.
These mounds acted like ancient tombstones, visible from afar. Over time, ship burial became a powerful symbol across Scandinavia. It showed who held power, who mattered in the eyes of the gods and the people. And these traditions didn't stay local. From Norway to Sweden to as far as the British Isles, Viking ship burials became markers of Norse presence, belief, and ambition.
The first intact Viking boat burial site has been discovered on mainland Britain.
So when archaeologists in Norway uncovered a 66-foot ship buried beneath the soil, it wasn't just a random find. It was part of this much older tradition from a time when ships were the vehicles of kings, both in life and death. The Vikings didn't invent this ritual, but they perfected it in their own image. And this is how they went about it. What ship burials meant to the Vikings. To understand their Viking funerals, you first have to understand how they saw life, death, and the universe itself. In Norse mythology, the world wasn't just a single land, it was made up of 9 interconnected realms, each with its own beings and purpose. These worlds were all bound together by Yggdrasil, the great world tree.
This mighty tree rises at the geological center of the Norse spiritual cosmos,
whose branches and roots stretched across existence itself. The gods, like Odin and Thor, dwelled in Asgard, a lofty realm of divine power. Humans lived in Midgard, the earthly world, shielded by magical defenses. Other realms included Jotunheim, the land of giants, Alfheim, home to the life elves, and Hel, the shadowy place of the dead. Travel between these realms wasn't simple. It happened through magical paths like Bifrost, a glowing, burning rainbow bridge that connected Asgard to Midgard.
Quiver visually, so either way a decent description of a rainbow.
Norse sailors believed that crossing seas often mirrored these cosmic journeys. In that spiritual view, ships weren't just vessels for water. They were sacred tools, capable of carrying souls not only across oceans, but between life and death itself. Vikings believed that when a person died, their soul had to travel, sometimes to Valhalla, the Hall of Warriors, sometimes to Folkvanger, Freyja's field for the brave, or even to Hel, the land of the dead. A ship burial, then, was a way to prepare the dead for this journey. It was both practical and symbolic. A typical Viking funeral could happen in one of 2 main ways. In some cases, the ship was dragged onto land. The body of the deceased was placed inside with grave goods, weapons, jewelry, tools, food, animals, and sometimes even slaves. Then the ship was buried under a large mound of earth, forming what looked like a small hill. These burial mounds served as eternal homes for the dead, blending the ship and the tomb into one.
There are only 3 other well-preserved Viking longships that have ever been discovered in Norway.
In other cases, the ship was set on fire and pushed out to sea. The burning vessel lit up the night in a dramatic farewell visible for miles. Fire had deep meaning to the Norse. It was purification, release, and transformation. Sending someone off in flames was a way to burn away the old life and guide the soul forward. These funerals weren't just private ceremonies. They were grand public events. Entire communities were gathered. Skalds, the Norse poets, might chant or sing, animals were sacrificed, and rituals were performed to honor the gods and bless the passage. The size and richness of a funeral often reflected the status of the person. A great warrior or noble might be buried with gold, decorated shields, or rare foreign items brought back from raids or trade. Viking ships themselves were masterworks. They were long, sleek, and perfectly built for both speed and strength. They were symbols of freedom, power, and identity. To be buried in one was not just a sign of wealth, but of honor. It said the person had lived well, fought bravely, and was ready for the next world. Some ship burials were so grand, they still stun archaeologists today.
The greatest Viking ship ever found was discovered on home soil.
These funerals preserved more than bones. They captured the worldview of a people who saw no divide between land and sea, life and death, myth and reality. All of this made the discovery in Østfold County even more shocking, because what they found there wasn't just a Viking burial, it was something older, stranger, and possibly the missing link in how the ship burial tradition truly began. Looking at a similar discovery might help us understand it. The Leikanger find that changed the timeline. Before the world turned its eyes to Gjellestad, another burial site quietly shifted the course of Viking history. Tucked away in the village of Leikanger, Norway, archaeologists uncovered a mound that didn't just hold bones and artifacts, but a timeline-altering secret. It was here that researchers found what is now considered the oldest known ship burial in Scandinavia, predating even the official start of the Viking. The site, known as the Hagen Burial Mound, looked like many other grassy hills scattered across the region. It stood about 23 feet tall and stretched nearly 200 feet in diameter. But when experts began excavating, they quickly realized this was no ordinary barrow.
Experts won't immediately unearth the ship, but will digitally map the site.
Buried deep inside were the remnants of a large wooden vessel. While its shape was long lost to time, its story was hinted at through large rivets and fragments of ship timber still embedded in the soil. Among the wooden remains were pieces of broken human bones. They were charred and shattered, suggesting a powerful funerary rite had taken place over 1,000 years ago. But who was buried here? That question remains unanswered. No weapons, no full skeleton, and no grave goods were found intact. Yet, the size of the mound, the scale of the ship, and the manner of burial all pointed to someone of immense importance, likely a leader, maybe even a king.
This is the fire investigator who will try and piece together the prehistoric jigsaw.
Preserved is absolutely incredible.
Some historians have floated the name Herlock, a legendary king of Leikanger mentioned in Norse sagas. But sagas, while colorful, are often unreliable sources for hard dates. And this burial posed a deeper mystery. It was carbon dated to around 700 AD. This date is key. The Viking Age, by most accounts, begins in 793 AD, marked by the infamous raid on the Lindisfarne Monastery in England. But the Leikanger ship burial predates this by nearly a century.
Dig up the first Viking ship in more than a century.
That means that the shipbuilding expertise, religious rituals, and seafaring culture associated with the Vikings were already well developed long before they began launching raids across Europe. These weren't crude proto-Vikings fumbling with new ideas. These were organized, high-status elites already embracing ship burials and signaling their wealth and worldview through them. Even more surprising, Leikanger helps fill in a major historical gap between mainland Scandinavia and England's famous Sutton Hoo ship burial, which dates to the early 600s. Sutton Hoo showed that ship burials existed in early Anglo-Saxon England, but it wasn't clear how that tradition fit into Scandinavia's own timeline.
The features that made it such an effective combat ship are also intact. Most important is its shape.
Leikanger bridged that cultural and chronological divide. It suggested a two-way exchange of ideas, or at least a shared set of spiritual beliefs across the North Sea. And there's more. The ship's design, though mostly gone, seemed large and robust, likely built for open water travel, not just local rivers or fjords. This further supports the theory that shipbuilding technology in Scandinavia was advanced well before the Viking Age, and that seafaring was already central to elite culture. So when the Gjellestad ship was discovered years later, archaeologists already had a new framework.
The most important aspects of the Viking Age that they are exceptionally curious people and exceptionally brave where they want to go with their ships and why.
Thanks to Leikanger, they knew that ship burials didn't suddenly appear with the Vikings. They evolved over time and grew in complexity, in size, and in cultural meaning. Leikanger was the missing link, the proof that an older chapter of Viking history had been there all along, waiting beneath the soil. And with that shift in understanding, experts turned their eyes to another mysterious hill in Østfold. What secrets would the Gjellestad ship hold? As it turned out, it was more than anyone could have expected.
The exact place where he's been buried has remained a mystery. There's a new chapter in this story, and it's certainly one for the history books.
The Gjellestad ship, buried but not forgotten.
When the Vikings came, they used ships. Ships were light and flexible. They moved like an animal in the waves.
When the Gjellestad ship was found in 2018, it was lying inside a large burial mound. But unlike other famous Viking graves, this one had a different story to tell. The ship was estimated to date back to somewhere between 800 and 900 AD, which placed it right in the heart of the Viking Age. That alone was impressive. But what made it truly stand out was how intact it still was. While time, weather, and farming had damaged parts of it, the hull remained largely in place, which was something incredibly rare for Viking graves. But the mystery only deepened from there.
The Gokstad and Oseberg ships were between 50 and 100 years younger.
The burial site seemed rushed. The ship was buried unusually shallow, only about 20 inches below the surface. This wasn't standard for elite Viking funerals, which were usually carefully planned and protected. Why this one was so close to the surface raised questions. Was it done in haste? Was someone trying to hide it? Or was this a response to conflict, disease, or some emergency? Inside the burial ship, more surprises awaited. The most obvious was what was missing. There was no body in the central burial chamber. Viking ship graves were meant to carry the dead into the afterlife. Yet this ship's passenger was gone. No skeleton, no ashes, nothing. But the grave wasn't empty. Burial goods were still there.
This was found in northern Troms of the Norwegian coast, took place very rapidly around 11,500 years ago.
Researchers found weapon fragments, including a broken sword and ornate spearheads, as well as remnants of fine textiles. One of the most puzzling finds was a carved stone slab positioned beside where the body should have been. The purpose of this slab remains unclear. Was it a tomb marker, a ritual object, or a placeholder for someone never buried there? Perhaps most intriguing of all were the shield fragments arranged around the burial area. They weren't just tossed aside, they were placed in a circular pattern, like a ritual circle. This odd arrangement seemed symbolic, maybe a spiritual barrier, a protective spell, or even a warning. It added a layer of ritual or superstition that didn't match earlier burials. All of this raised a powerful mystery. Who was this burial for? And why was it so different from others? There are theories, of course. Some say it was a royal or a chieftain hurriedly buried during a time of unrest. Others believe it was a symbolic burial, a grave for someone whose body was lost at sea or never recovered. And some go even further, arguing that this was no normal burial at all, but something ceremonial or even magical. But here comes the part that made archaeologists panic. What they found under the ship shocked everyone to the bone. What they found under the ship shocked everyone.
This is the first example of a ship where the technical construction of mast and rigging has been preserved.
As archaeologists dug deeper beneath the Gjellestad Viking ship, they expected to find soil, maybe older wooden supports, or natural debris. What they found instead was something no one could explain. It was a hidden chamber directly below the main burial area, and this chamber changed everything. Unlike the rest of the site, this lower chamber was different in tone, texture, and purpose. The soil was dark and burned, rich with ash and soot. Charred timber lined the area, suggesting it had been set on fire at some point as part of a ritual. Whatever had happened here wasn't part of the original ship burial, at least not in the traditional sense. Then came the real surprise. Among the blackened soil, the team uncovered a handful of small, round coins.
The archaeologists were very lucky to have found two objects known as coin dies.
But they weren't Viking coins. These were foreign, made of silver, and marked with Arabic script.
By the time this was struck, the Vikings, who were now in England.
After careful examination, experts identified them as Islamic dirhams, minted in 9th century Baghdad. This alone was astonishing. These coins had traveled thousands of miles across land and sea to end up buried under a Viking ship in Norway. But one coin in particular drew the most attention. It was pierced right through the center, as if stabbed or nailed. That single hole might seem like nothing, but in Norse tradition, it carried meaning. Vikings sometimes pierced coins and hung them as amulets, but they also marked coins in rituals, especially in graves, to symbolize danger, curses, or warnings.
These blocks of steel were the basic starting point for a Viking sword.
In some cases, it was believed that piercing a coin killed its value in this world and offered it to the afterlife. So what was this doing beneath the ship? Theories began to swirl.
Inland in Britain and Ireland,
In France, they sailed all the way up to Paris, up the Seine. In Russia, again, they're penetrating.
Some researchers believe it points to long-distance trade routes connecting the Norse with the Islamic world, hinting at a level of secret diplomacy or underground alliances we never imagined. Others think the coins, especially the pierced one, were left as offerings or even warnings to anyone who might disturb the grave. But more chilling is the idea that the lower chamber was meant for a different burial altogether. Maybe it was someone considered cursed, dishonored, or feared. The burned soil and hidden nature of the chamber suggest it was kept separate on purpose. Some now suspect this was a double burial, one public, one secret. The discovery rewrote everything experts thought they knew about Viking graves. What began as a simple excavation turned into a historical mystery that now haunts archaeologists to this day. What we still don't know, and what may come next.
Same features also with these beautiful decorations which have been molded along the edges of the planking.
The Gjellestad ship burial continues to baffle experts, even years after its discovery. In the world of Viking archaeology, nothing quite like it has ever been found.
These ancient structures stand as ghostly landmarks from the past, their true history.
While other burial ships have been unearthed before, none had the same strange mix of signs of a grand vessel, a secret burnt chamber beneath it, foreign coins, and, most puzzling of all, no body. This absence of a corpse turns the site from a historical discovery into a full-blown mystery. The topside was systematically removed, and bits and pieces from the ship were slowly uncovered. Why build a massive ship grave, one of the largest ever found, and then leave it empty? Some scholars believe the grave may have been symbolic and meant to confuse enemies, hide the death of a powerful figure, or serve as a ritual decoy. In times of war or political unrest, faking a burial could have been a way to protect secrets or mislead rivals. Others believe the body was once there but later removed, either stolen, relocated for ritual reasons.
During certain times where people were buried. Some were cremated, some were buried whole.
Or even intentionally taken by those who didn't want this person remembered. The secret chamber and the burned soil suggest that something happened here that wasn't meant to be known by future generations. The presence of Islamic coins further adds to the confusion, raising questions about diplomacy, trade, and unexpected global connections. Fueling the mystery even more was what happened after the site was opened. The burial mound was quickly sealed off again after the initial excavation. While archaeologists said this was to preserve the site and protect it from weather and looting, the sudden closure sparked a wave of speculation. Some believe key discoveries were hidden from the public either because they challenged accepted Viking history or revealed politically sensitive truths. Debate also continues over how Viking burial customs may have influenced or been influenced by other cultures, especially Anglo-Saxon traditions in England. The timing of the Gjellestad grave during the height of Viking raids and settlement across Europe hints at shared rituals, rival symbols, and evolving spiritual beliefs.
We are going to lift the boats up the cliff. We are going to carry them across the mountains.
What makes all of this even more thrilling is the fact that Norway still holds many untouched burial mounds. Several lie within miles of the Gjellestad site, waiting to be explored. If one grave ship could stir up this much mystery, what could be hidden beneath the others?
In a way, sacrifice a boat like that. So I think it must have been a very powerful person.
Each new dig has the potential to rewrite history to either confirm what we think we know about the Viking Age or to pull the rug out from under our feet. Gjellestad taught us that Viking burials were far more complex than just warriors with swords and ships. There were spiritual, political, and even global layers. For now, the Gjellestad grave leaves us with more questions than answers. But with new technologies and growing interest in hidden history, we may not be far from another discovery that brings us closer to the full truth, or opens up new mysteries entirely.
There were also found traces of grave robbers, and unfortunately, there seems to be signs that this could be the case for this ship as well.
What do you think about this discovery? What do you think about these discoveries? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Kindly hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for more amazing and inspiring videos. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. See you in the next video.